decentralization. According to Christopher 2019, power is transferred from the federal government to local government as a result of decentralization. Meanwhile, LD White stated that centralization is the process of transferring administrative authority from a lower to a higher level of government, while decentralization is the opposite. Since 1980, a new paradigm for public administration known as New Public Management has evolved to replace the traditional public management. NPM reforms are defined as a group of reforms and initiatives that are mostly implemented in local agencies and municipal administrations in order to improve the public services. The government has implemented a number of reforms that are in line with the characterization concept of the NPM reforms, and one of the characterization is decentralization of authority. In Malaysia education system, giving new responsibility to schools is a prominent form of decentralization. The most notable decentralization initiative implemented for the education system over the last 2 decades are the establishment of the district education offices, changes asking for the decentralization of the national curriculum, and the privatization of higher education are among these measures. There are 3 main criteria of decentralization, which is delegation of power, bottom-up decision-making, and fast response time.
According to the World Bank Economic Monitor Report on High-Performing Education, Malaysia is one of the most centralized in the world, and it causes difficulties to make changes into adapting a good system regarding education. Budget allocations within schools, student assessments, and choices of textbooks in Malaysia education system also using a centralized approach where it will lead towards struggling for all parties involved to segregate it fairly. Moreover, the school management had to seek an approval from the macro policymakers before implementing their purpose. They need to go through a lot of processes. Malaysia cannot be improved if there is no autonomy that is given adequate to help in the development regarding education.
The politics make the process for being decentralized harder. The political demands push students to study many subjects at one time. Students need to learn more than 3 languages, religious subjects, and study many Malaysian histories. The system in Malaysian education is influenced by the politically motivated that promote recitation by students rather than critical thinking. The education system focuses more on the quantity of students and not the quality. The Ministry of Education in Malaysia is controlled by politicians. Most of them does not have a reliable background to regulate and impose the policy. The policy that had been made most likely because of their own capacity, not totally discussed with the expert. Education in Malaysia is still encountering various issues, especially lack of funding to build infrastructure, installation problems, and curriculum constraints. This is because there are many types of students in Malaysia, such as urban, cities, and inland. In addition, the system of education nowadays relies too much on exam-centric system where students need to aim for good grades. The school need to put high KPIs for their students in order to fulfill the government's requirement.
Decentralization at the school level do not have a huge amount of power. However, the Residential Schools and Excellent Schools Division, part of the Ministry of Education, should finalize the areas of competence in writing. Before commencing any program, the CSC must choose a region and draw and request for proposal, RFP. Schools cannot establish a program without ministry permissions and funding. Schools must examine their budgets to determine if their project will benefit and make money. Without ministry permission and financials, implementing the initiative or program is going to be difficult. Decentralized schools can choose 10% of their students to stimulate creativity. 5 of 6 autonomy schools representatives said that they still lack autonomy. Given the problems a selection process would cause, these institutions cannot be autonomous. They pick teachers and coaches, but in practice, instructor appointments are unclear. In addition, principals and headmasters have no rights to fire or hire teachers due to limited powers because it is still under Ministry of Education powers. This shows centralized decision-making, notably in the case of selections and firing. which is not within autonomous schools' jurisdictions. At the cluster school of excellence level, administrators are in charge to manage money for certain areas. When planning regional budgets, they must follow Treasury circulars and guidelines. Ministry entities pay additional attention to program providers in financial management. The Ministry of Education also has emphasized from whom their suppliers get in when it comes to spending money on food, etc. Because some suppliers are not registered with the government, the ministry recommendations and priorities are not always the best. This again slowed them down because the school had to put off starting the program and resubmit their RFP for approval from the government.
Consequences of decentralization Malaysian education systems. Firstly is abuse of power, wrongful use of a position of authority to influence employees, students, colleges or volunteers. For example, coercion to participate in activities or decision-making in violation of laws, regulations or policies. In the education system, abuse of power occurs when the government servants hold on to the power by micromanaging, not asking for inputs from others, solo decision-making on the distribution of responsibilities and promotion of employees are the main ways that leader abuses the power. Students can be emotionally harmed if a school abuses its power, which can lead to anxiety over assignments and exams. Secondly, decreased management efficiency. Accountability is a source of stress, frustration for teachers at all levels of management. Teachers appear to reject it as an additional burden on top of what they perceive to be an already excessive workload. When the efficiency of teaching is lost, students become unmotivated to learn and achieve the higher grades in class. And teachers also do not have time to prepare the materials for teaching. Thirdly, decreased pupil productivity. Productivity means the ability to generate, create, improve, or bring forth commodities and services as a quality, state, or fact, and it is essentially defines efficiency. When the decentralization occurs in Malaysia education system, the productivity of pupils at schools decline as a result of external variables such as deadlines, stress, low confidence, bad health. Meanwhile, internal factors such as physical and emotional exhaustion, unmotivation, and lack of support might make students feel less productive.
First, give power or authority to school. In the case of decentralizations of education, which mainly focuses on the school, whether it is primary or secondary, principal and headmaster is known as the top leader who is on control and manage the whole organization. The delegations of power on its authorities by allowing the principals to act like the CEOs may foster a more efficient system in school, but in reality, it is not work like the theory. To illustrate, the principal is required to follow dozens or hundreds of rules, program requirements, spending procedures, and also a discipline code. Trust and give autonomy to its teachers or education citizens on creating innovations in the study. Autonomy is very important and it creates a lot of advantages towards those who apply and use it. With the implementation of an autonomy, Malaysia education can be better and more effective together with the system of decentralization, as it could encourage the productivity and the innovation. Hence, a clear mission and vision is needed in order to create the innovation. As a result of autonomy, decentralization in school and university will be indirectly create the space for teachers to be more creative and critical, in which they are eligible to use any method or approach that is suitable for the current learning situation, especially during the COVID-19. Respond by means of promptness. A quick response might open a space for the opportunities and trade. However, with a proper and appropriate plan and idea of decision-making can be carried out in an effective way. For example, PPD and KPM can grant local officials, such as the principal or headmaster, to have more autonomy and power in order to make a response within the situation or the condition that happened at sudden. But the policies, the rules and the regulations that have been determined and specified by the Pejabat Pendidikan Daerah and Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia have to be followed. To be specific,
The response by means of promptness helps the lower management to reply and answer the parties involved, such as parents and students, towards the situations that happen.
All in all, the decentralisation has been implemented in Malaysia education system. However, there are many loopholes in its implementation. The government, specifically the Ministry of Education, should take actions by improving the decentralisation in the education system and occupy the loopholes on its implementation. This is because the decentralisation promotes greater involvement in school management and it enhances the accountability.